Sénateur Dagenais, la parole est à vous.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is from Mr. Thompson of Indigenous Services Canada. The supplementary estimates request over $2 billion for the Family and Child Program. So this is not anything new as a government obligation. So I'd like to have an explanation. Why did the Minister of Finance not put this expense in the main estimates? With all due respect, don't you find as a civil servant that you are being politically manipulated when these expenses are curiously appearing here as soon as the budget was tabled?
Beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you. Thank you for your question on this funding. The way that it's working, we're following the state of negotiations with our Indigenous, and so this is the third tranche that we receive for compensation. We received the first budget in the Supplementary Estimate C last year, if my memory is correct. This was $1.2 billion for compensation at the time. In the main estimates, you'll find the largest sum, about 20 million, to make sure that we would be prepared. And as negotiations continue, we are adjusting in according to the negotiations. So what you see here is extra funding of $2.1 billion for costs related to compensation. And so we are able to provide all the funding that's available so that we will be able to respond rapidly as soon as we will have reached a final agreement. So if we stay on the same subject, could you give us an idea of what happens with the money with this compensation program? So who is the money given to, and what control do you have on the payments up until the end point, that is to say, to those who will be compensated? Right. So the money will be put in a fund that will be managed by a third party to determine eligibility. I could ask my colleague, Mrs. Catherine Lab, to explain further.
Merci bien pour votre question.
Thank you for your question, Mr. Senator. As my colleague was saying, we are still negotiating, and so we're taking the lead from our partners. So we are working, as he was explaining, to put money in a fund, and that will be managed by a third party, and the details will evolve according to the negotiations to make sure that we are meeting our obligations in the given timeline. To respond to the last question, we have immediate measures that were implemented this year, and that can be that are a few $1 million to work with our partners to make sure that the money will be sent to the children who require it. So even though we're still negotiating, we're trying to implement reforms of the program. As you know, these children are very vulnerable, and if we can implement some measures immediately to address the underfunding issue, we will work with our partners to do that, and we will continue to try to speed up these negotiations as much as possible so that the entire reform can be implemented. Do I have a few seconds left, Mr. Chair? I imagine so. So the supplementary budget we have $1.5 billion for therapeutics linked to COVID-19. I would like for civil servant explain to me what did the Minister of Finance forget to buy in the main estimates, and here, so little time after the main estimates, we have this request, $1.5 billion for therapeutics.
Honorable Senator, thank you for the question. This funding was allocated in the previous fiscal year originally, and is a reprofile of money from the last fiscal year to this fiscal year. And so it's not a question that the funding was identified late, too late for the main estimates. It was allocated originally in the previous fiscal year to allow the agency to sign contracts with companies so that we had the money available. And then we would bring it forward to the current fiscal year to match the timing of when the payments will take place.
Merci, Sénateur Dagenais.
Thank you, Senator Dagenais.